As wildland firefighters, we operate in a dynamic and inherently hazardous environment. We deal with constantly changing variables that significantly impact our decisions and tactics. Using the Incident Command System, we work with diverse partners from locations across the country and around the world. We encounter communication barriers, political pressure, time constraints, and dynamic high-risk situations with the potential for negative outcomes. So, how do we deal with these challenges? By using the risk management process. The 5-step risk management process is found in the Incident Response Pocket Guide, or IRPG. Identify hazards, assess hazards, develop controls and make risk decisions, implement controls, supervise, and evaluate. Regardless of our level of experience or positions we hold, the risk management process is relevant to all of us. Whether this is your first exposure as a brand new firefighter or you are a supervisor with years of experience, we all manage risk. There are others who face equally daunting risk management challenges. One such group is the Columbia River Bar pilots. The Columbia River Bar is considered one of the most dangerous stretches of water in the world. Bar pilots are expert sailors who are intimately familiar with the waters found where rivers meet the ocean. The pilots board ocean-going ships and assume navigational control when they transit across the bar. Just getting on board a 1,000-ton vessel in a winter storm can be a significant exercise in managing risk. Other challenges faced by the pilots include unpredictable weather, fatigue, communications issues, as well as political and economic pressures. The consequences of failure can be catastrophic. Through it all, the Columbia River Bar pilots have maintained an impressive safety record. Let's take a closer look at what they have to say about managing risk.
We do recognize that there is risk in everything we do. And the Columbia River Bar in particular has been designated as the roughest harbor entrance in the world. There are some others very close. That being said, a big part of our job is managing that risk. And experience then tells us when is it too risky to do it and when isn't it too risky. You really have to manage the risk for what your abilities are.
You have to be hyper-focused on what you're doing when we're doing our job, but at the same time, see it and be aware of everything around you. Your situational awareness has to be high all the time, and it's easy to get distracted by a small thing that can take your mind off the big picture, and that's something we have to be careful about a lot.
I see my job to give pilots the best information that they can get in order to mitigate any risk for a particular ship they may be handling or an evolution that they may be involved in. So that takes all kinds of forms, from the planning process, which starts early in the morning, knowing what kind of ships we have, what kind of drafts we have, what the weather we're looking at is. It's my job to compile a lot of that information and work with our operations pilot throughout the day to enable him to make the right decisions.
For situational awareness for us, the first step is what's the weather? So looking at all of the weather tools out there, NOAA buoys, wind gauges, calling the National Weather Service, talking with them. We always have to have a visual in our mind situational awareness of what the weather is and what's coming. That way we can plan our movements of ships and how we're going to board them, be it pilot boat or helicopter. Situational awareness on board a ship as a pilot is different than as a ship captain or as a navigation officer. Each position has its own focus. The captain's looking out for his crew and the overall operation of the ship, where the pilot is just doing the navigation.
Danger is generally a function of how high a wave are you potentially going to encounter, because even the big ships that you see in the rivers and harbors of the United States, if they take a large wave broadside, they can be, as they say, turned turtle or capsized and sink. So it's critically important that you know what the conditions are and not take a ship out in those conditions where she would be potentially in danger, despite the capability of a bar pilot who is on the bridge directing the navigation of that ship through the crew.
Risk assessment starts early on in here, and we're looking at the age of the ship, the nationality of the ship, the weather conditions, what the current's going to be doing, taking all that into account. So you've got your kind of base expectation there. There's always uncertainty built in with that. and you have to allow for uncertainty both ways. You know, it may be that the weather lays down and it's a lot better and nicer, it goes great, but the weather could go worse, the ship could be worse. A lot of things can come in there, and we all have that can-do attitude you spoke about. We didn't get to be ship's captains without having that and the get-her-done kind of mentality. We have to tone that down in here. There's times you can get it done, but should you get it done? You know, if you're working right on the edge of that can-do line, I can do this, provided everything goes perfect, then you're too close. You have to have room for the uncertainty in there.
It's intuition and experience. You know, how many times have you seen it? And, you know, so I was at sea for 24 years before I became a pilot, and then another 13 years as a pilot. So, yeah, I've seen a lot. Not only here, but you know, sailing in and out of ports in Asia, Africa, fishing boats there. You can always kind of fall back on your experiences and you know, use them where you are.
When I look at firefighting, you're constantly having to make judgment calls about what are the wind and other conditions that are affecting the fire's behavior, and how do you deploy manpower in the midst of that kind of swirl of dynamic physical conditions associated with, you know, the humidity, the wind, etc., and what the fire's doing, direction. Very similar set of highly dynamic factors have to be evaluated by the pilots.
There's a saying that the ship's safest place is sitting at the dock, but that's not what it's meant to do. So it has to sail, there's risk involved, period. And bad things can happen, but you need to be as prepared as you can for those to happen. And they will happen, so you have to have at least a thought process in your head of how you're going to deal with it when it happens.
One of the decisions that bar pilots have to make, especially during the winter months, is do they close the bar to commercial ship traffic, which may result in a buildup of ships outside the mouth of the river for a day or two. It's a safety call they've got to make based upon the conditions that they are monitoring on an hourly basis during rough conditions. The economic consequences of closing the bar are significant, and that's a decision that the bar pilots take very seriously. They collaborate with the Coast Guard on it, but the Coast Guard really defers significantly to the bar pilots because they are the ones with the expertise in how particular conditions would affect an ocean-going vessel.
We don't do formal checklists while we're underway on a ship. There is one that we do right when we start, either inbound or outbound. It's called a Master Pilot Exchange. And they'll have a pilot card that lists the details of that ship. And through that Master Pilot Exchange, the master being the ship's captain, he and I will talk, or he or she, I should say, will talk about the ship, any characteristics, anything that might be unusual. Maybe one radar isn't working. We go through that process. So there's our checklist before we start the transit. Once we get going, though, there's no checklist there. Could be a continual conversation. Let him know what I'm planning on doing, and if he has any concerns, he can ask me. You know, when the ship's moving, it's important to be looking out the window and seeing what's in front of you. So if you get lost in checklists, then you quit looking out the window.
The risk of actually ending up in the water, that's where our safety equipment comes in, and training with the boat crews, helicopter crews, working with the Coast Guard to recover a man overboard. So we have a lot of personal safety equipment, our float coats, position indicating beacons, strobe lights, waterproof radios, and then a lot of equipment on the boats as well to help find us and recover us if we end up in the water.
Operational controls, hopefully the ship's crew and myself have been through very similar trainings. Yeah, there's different qualities of them, but there's a standard in the industry of how ships are supposed to be operated. And if it's not following that standard, you know, then you need to figure out why and try and correct it. Every ship we go on, it's different. It's a different ship, different equipment, different nationality. They do speak English, but some better than others. I can't complain because I don't speak their language any better than they speak mine, probably worse than they speak mine. So there's challenges there.
We have online dispatching, and it's live. Any changes, if a ship's estimated time of arrival changes, boom, just goes right in the system. So these guys can look on their phones, their computers, their tablets, and know what's going on.
Our organization, we have 16 pilots right now. We're all equal owners of the business. We all do exactly the same job, and we all rotate through that operation pilot position. So as I'm making decisions for other people, whether the ship should sail or not, tomorrow they might be making it for me. And when it's really rough weather, that one operations pilot who's making the decision isn't sitting in his room by himself. There's 2 or 3 other pilots and they're discussing it together. And you really have to err on the conservative side. You know, when we're talking about a 700-foot ship with whatever hazardous stuff they have on board, you know, there is no option of not making the right decision. You can't lose a ship, you can't hit the bottom with it and run aground. So quite often we'll make a more conservative decision, which then makes your partners more comfortable that you're making the right decision for them.
We're 17 peers, there's no hierarchy structure, and we share that leadership role. We rotate through that all the time, but we're always making decisions for everybody. We do have definitely a variance in risk tolerance between individuals, but we have to keep the group in mind all the time. And you'll find, I think, that in general, our senior pilots that have seen more incidents, had more experience here on the job, are going to have a lower risk tolerance, understanding the implications of pushing it too far because they've been there and seen it. Newer guys will come in a little more confident sometimes than they should be and push it. And so that's something that the senior guys have to work with the junior guys. When the operations pilot's in here making decisions, if he's a newer guy, there'll be senior guys in here guiding him, coaching him.
When that storm's coming in, we watch the waves come, we go out and try and bring ships in. At some point it becomes too dangerous to move the ships, so we stop moving any ships. It's an easy decision to make, or relatively easy to make, because you know, there's a fear factor involved too. If, you know, maybe I took the boat out and I couldn't get on the ship and it wasn't a safe thing. So we just stop traffic then. So stopping traffic is a safety decision. Getting it going again, that's all based on economics and trying to get the commerce moving again. You want to do it safely, but you don't want to do it so quickly that you're putting the ships in jeopardy still. So there's that fine line of when is the storm going to be low enough where it's okay to sail the ship, and you never want to get a ship moving before that line. Another normalization that we have here is in the beginning of winter, storms start coming. That first storm, we might be a lot more cautious on when we close the bar and open the bar than the end of winter. There is some normalization there, and I don't feel like at the end of winter we're making riskier decisions. Well, maybe they're riskier, but not risky decisions. It's just that we're making those decisions more frequently so that we're getting more tuned in to making the right decision instead of the more conservative decision. We always kind of joke about it the first time we close the bar. It's like, well, yeah, come February, this will be normal.
You need to realize, number one, that you're never going to do away with risk completely. All you can hope to do, and there are certainly steps you can take to lower that risk to, I don't want to say an acceptable level, but you know, it's still going to be dangerous, even in the best of times, in this industry and in firefighting, I would imagine as well.
What can we learn from the Columbia River Bar pilots that we can apply in wildland fire? How does their risk management compare with ours? Look at the risk management process found in the IRPG to help you answer this question. It is a reliable tool that can help us manage complex situations in a dynamic environment. Regardless of your experience or position, managing risk is everyone's job.